me. They were only boys. Samuel McWhirter from Glenan and Thomas Chambers, just a boy soldier at 17 years of age. And the ironic story about these two young men is that they're both born in Orange Row, Glenan, a row of mill houses that some of perhaps that you know, they still stand to this day, unused, slightly derelict, but they still stand, called Orange Row not because of any political reason, but orange because of the colour of the bricks. And Tommy and Samuel McWhirter lived side by side. But Glenanne Mill was central in Glenan. It's a mill village, just as Bessbrook and the Richardsons is a mill village. Glenan was the Greys and a mill village, and it was the only employment that there was. And these two young men worked in Glenanne Mill for very little money, to be honest. And in early 1915, the recruiting band and a few men of the Royal Irish Fusiliers, if you know Glenan Glen, which had been recently bought by the Orange in Glenan and refurbished and redone and new pathways and stuff, if you know that avenue up to the Glen, that band of the Royal Irish Fusiliers on the recruiting drive walked up the avenue to the factory, the old mill, and they were met by the workers and Joseph Gray and entertained. They were given tea and sandwiches and spent the afternoon in the factory, but their main purpose was recruitment, exactly the same as recruitment in Bessbrook Mill. That was the core of the mill villages. It was a huge drive to get young men out of the mills and into the Royal Irish Fusiliers and other regiments down the country. And so those young men were perhaps excited about recruitment. They were originally Ulster volunteers. They had trained in the Glen under Joseph Gray and Joseph Lowry. The Ulster volunteers had trained in Glenan Glen. They were already young soldiers in a sense, but they were training for civil war against Redmond's Irish volunteers. But this new war would take a different avenue for them. And so they were caught up in the whole euphoria then of Kitchener's new army, of the 36th Ulster Division and everything else. And these two young men who lived side by side, who worked side by side, travelled to France side by side. These were young men that had never perhaps seen the coastline. They'd never perhaps went as far as maybe Warren Point or Newcastle, and that was it. And Tommy kept a diary, and that diary is a wonderful insight. The last time I was here, I read from his diary, and his diary, if you know the way folks, their handwriting years ago was amazing, and Tommy's handwriting was amazing through the diary. And at the very start it says, "Off on my big adventure." That was the very first insert into Tommy Chambers' diary. "Off on my big adventure." If only he knew. If only he knew what he would face in a year's time. Tommy didn't know. He trained in Seaford along with Samuel. They sailed to France together, and they came here. They came here to the Ancre, and they came here to hell, because that's what it was. And we have absolutely, it's all sanitised now, as Phyllis explained. You cannot even begin to imagine the hell that this was for these young men. The noise, the fear, the slaughter, and the blood. Tommy kept that diary meticulously through his campaign here in France. But the very last entry that Tommy made in his diary was made on the 1st of July 1916, and it was at 2 a.m. on the morning of the Battle of the Somme. And instead of the normal scripted handwriting that Tommy used, and that was so beautiful throughout the diary, this was as if a young man had been struck with fear. It's actually scrawled, scored basically on the page: "Off to the trenches, 1st of July 1916, 2 a.m. A little over 5 hours later, Tommy Chambers was dead. He went over the top with Samuel McWhirter, the 9th Battalion, the Royal Irish Fusiliers. And I'm sure those two men, I have no doubt, who were nearly inseparable in life, who almost, I'm sure, would have looked at each other before they went over the top, before they heard the whistle. Amidst all the mayhem, the mud, the blood, that have looked at each other, and they knew in their hearts, and many men, most men knew in their hearts what they faced. They knew what they were going to. The wire, as Phil says, wasn't cut. Wasn't cut. Most of the shells were duds, the wrong explosives, everything else, and they were walking to their deaths basically. And Samuel and Thomas Chambers died within perhaps a few minutes of each other. And the wonderful thing, the ironic twist of all these things, is that the two young men who lived together, worked together, fought together, died together, now lie basically in a mass grave, as you can see. They lie together. And that to me is a very poignant thing. It shows about the inseparability of friendship and of love between community. I have Tommy's Bible. It was found on him, taken off him when his body was taken here to Hamel. Hamel, as far as I'm aware, was a casualty clearance station. Tommy died here, basically at the casualty clearance station. And this is his Bible, badly worn, badly battered, but still 109 years later, or 110 years later, still readable, still legible, and still as I have no doubt that Tommy Chambers read that Bible. One man said one time, there's no such thing as an atheist on a battlefield, and it's very true. If you had to have a week of a bombardment of what those men had, the noise and the slaughter, if you had spent almost 6 months perhaps at the front, witnessing what they witnessed, and Tommy wrote in his diary about near misses, close encounters with shells and artillery and snipers. He lived with the fear of death all the time. Tommy read this Bible. There's absolutely no doubt Tommy Chambers read this Bible, and it brought him comfort. We talked the other day on the bus about a tot of rum, and how it was important to the troops to get a tot of rum because that perhaps would have given them a bit of courage, a bit of Dutch courage, a bit of oomph to get up over the top. There was no comfort more than that. I've read extracts from pre-battles of the Somme and other places where men with the strains of Abide With Me was heard coming from the trenches. Men on the eve of battle, reading their Bibles, getting comfort, the only comfort that they could possibly get. Mother was gone, they were far from home, thousands of miles from home, but they found the comfort here. And I want to read just 2 or 3 verses from Tommy's wee New Testament. It's found in chapter 15 and the verse 10. If ye keep my commandments, ye shall abide in my love, even as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things have I spoken unto you, that my joy might remain in you, and that your joy might be full. This is my commandment, that ye love one another as I have loved you. For greater love hath no man than this, than a man lay down his life for his friends. People talk about young men going over the top for king and country, and perhaps there was a great fervour of patriotism and all, of course there was. But when it came to the eve of the battle, those young men fought for each other. It was a camaraderie, a relationship between soldier and soldier and soldier. They fought for each other, they looked out for each other. That's why men went over the top. As Phil talked about, Geoffrey Cather, the Bush Mills, Robert Quigg went over the top, looking for people, looking for friends, looking for family. That was more than anything else. And so I'm glad today that we have 2 Glenan LOL 133. People might say, well, what's Glenan and the link with Bessbrook? Well, there is a link Glenan and Bessbrook. Two mill villages, in a sense. I suppose King's Mills, in many ways, linked their villages forever, as those young men left Glenanne Mill and were slaughtered on the road home to Bessbrook. There's always been that link, but these two young men are linked to Bessbrook because Thomas Chambers is, in a sense, part of Bessbrook with the Chambers family. There is that link with the Chambers family in Bessbrook. There's also the link with the McWhirters in a different sense, and where Geoffrey Moffat of Muirheads in Bessbrook is married to Lisa, and that's Lisa's great uncle that lies beneath that stone. So the link's there with Bessbrook in both respects. We're glad to have Chris Sims and Stephen Gass, both members of LOL 133, and they're going to come forward and lay 2 wee crosses at the graves.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.